We've all been there, right? Trying to figure out what on earth is going on with our network. Why is the internet slow? Why does a certain switch not behave properly? Is it a bad cable? Is it my ISP? Well, today's self-hosted app spotlight is an app called SmokePing. It's a network monitoring and latency tool that will hopefully help you figure out your network issues. So when we first load up SmokePing, this is what it looks like. We're greeted with this welcome page, and on the left-hand side, there's a menu that lets us select from a bunch of different sites. And this is the primary view that we have here, right? So there's a bunch of websites that we configure, or targets is probably a better thing to call them. And what we can see here is the last 8 hours or so, and we have a little graph that shows us the latency spikes across different times of the evening. And we can see at sometime around 6:30 this evening, there was a little spike across all of the websites on my connection for some reason. And so what I might like to do then is drill into one of those specific charts. So if I click on google.com, for example, we can see that spike is there at 6:30. We can see right around here that spike was from, if we look at the chart at the bottom, the medium round trip time was 33 milliseconds, maximum was 42, and the minimum was 28. Things I look for at this moment, there's no packet loss. So that's a really good thing. If there was packet loss, that would mean that data is being sent, but not acknowledged as having been received as part of TCP. So that's good. And then we can also see that the probe used here was 20 ICMP echo pings every 300 seconds. So by default, SmokePing runs every 5 minutes, 300 seconds. And when it does that, it sends 20 pings and takes an average of those pings. And it does that for each target endpoint that we configure. So you can see on here from my internet sites, I have 5 websites. In Europe, I've got a few, Cambridge and UEA. Looks like I need to fix the UEA URL, for example. You can see that there. Right, perhaps I should do that after I finish recording the video. CERN is in here as well was the Swiss Railways website, I think, and Telefonica, so O2 in Germany. So I have things on different sides of the Atlantic because for me it's important to know how long things are taking to traverse the Atlantic. It's also important to know, because I'm on the east coast of the US, by the way. I know my accent doesn't sound like it, but I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And now I can see how long it takes data to get from me on the east coast to the Midwest, to the West Coast, and to Europe. And those are the places that I primarily do business with. So I do video calls with people on the West Coast and in Europe, and I have services hosted in England still. So for me, those are the things that are important to monitor. So that's what I want to monitor on the internet. What about a little closer to home? So let's just take a quick look at the WD-LAN section that's here. I've got a couple of submenus, and one of them is WD Core Network. And in here, I have all of the primary switches in my house. So I have a few Flex Minis. I have a couple of Unify U6 Pro access points, some PoE switches. My 10 gig aggregation switches are here. And you can see actually that this bonus aggregation switch, you can see the SmokePing, and you see where the tool gets its name from now. So you can see this thick blue line is the medium round trip time. But that kind of smoky blue background is kind of the standard deviation either side of that median. And so this is where the tool gets its name, SmokePing. Look at that. It looks just like smoke, and I love it. Now, if this wasn't a pattern, I'd be a little concerned. But because it's showing a very standard deviation from the mean, I'm actually not that worried. It's obviously just something to do with the way in which the network routes in that way. And as long as I'm not seeing any performance impacts, then I don't really need to worry too much about it. But what SmokePing absolutely excels at, and I think you can see that just on this one page, is giving you a lot of information in a very small area. And so let's take a moment just to look back at this spike at 6:30 p.m. So we can see here, 6:30 across YouTube, Jupiter Broadcasting, Is Twitter Dead Yet?, Google, and linuxserver.io, across all those 5 different internet websites. I had a spike. But if I look in my LAN, there is no spike to speak of. So OpenSense, there's no spike from Zoidberg, which is the name of the node that I run these services on. There's no spike to Pi-hole, which is my local DNS server. And if I look at any of the patterns around any of these other local switches around 630, I don't really see anything either. So let's just take a quick look at the local servers I have in my house. Home Assistant looks good. Morpheus looks good. That's the primary file server in this building. And Anton is my backup server, which is a Silicon Valley reference, by the way. So what I probably want to start doing is looking a bit further afield. And if I look at 630, sure enough, I can see that around, well, no, there's not really a good reason for it. Now I can see here. What I was expecting to see, actually, was around 630, I was expecting to see a spike in my DNS resolve times, which then translated into a spike in the ICMP ping responses. So I guess there must have just been some kind of routing problem upstream on the internet somewhere. It's one of the things about TCP/IP. It's a bit of a mystery sometimes, but this tool gives you some visibility. I won't say complete visibility, but some visibility into trying to figure out what the hell is going on with your network. And so let's just drill into one of these graphs for a second. Now I use Cloudflare as my primary DNS here. And so this is a really important one for me. And I can see this morning Spectrum were here fixing the internet on my neighbor's house, and obviously decided that that was the perfect time to interrupt my internet connection as well. And so some of the latency around 7, 8, 9 o'clock this morning was a little bit higher than we might like. But we can see the 360-day trend here looks pretty standard. Certainly the last 10 days looks okay. A couple of spikes here and there, but I didn't notice anything particularly going on. I'm going to switch to a different SmokePing instance here. This one's running on a server that I control in the UK at one of my parents' houses. And I want to show you the same graph. Now, this particular parent has fiber, so they have wonderful ping times, unlike me with my Spectrum DOCSIS 3 cable connection. It's just a bit all over the place. But you can see here, I installed this particular SmokePing instance back in, what's that, August 2022. And you can see that from month to month, there are actually some significant differences in the latency here. So when I say significant, I'm talking about, you know, the low was 5.8 milliseconds and the high was 16. And that looks like this big spike here around the middle of February. And let's just dig into that, actually. So we can just drag a little window like that and have a quick look and say, oh, yeah, look, on the 21st of February between 8 and 10 p.m., perhaps that provider, perhaps the internet provider had an outage at that point. And we can start to actually get real data to sample and use for diagnostics and triage purposes. This is particularly handy when you want to call your ISP and say, hey, my internet connection's been a bit rubbish for the last month or two. They'll be like, oh yeah, sure, we'll send you out a new router. We all know that that's just trying to kick the can down the road. Tools like this let you dig into where the problem might be, and you could always add new targets. So let's take a quick look at how to do that. Configuring targets in SmokePing is really straightforward. So what I'm going to do very quickly is connect through the VS Code remote SSH plugin to Zoidberg, which is the host that I'm running SmokePing on. Now I want to look at the directory that I use for my SmokePing app data, which we can see here is this one. So this is the compose file I'm using to deploy this container. It's sitting behind traffic so that I get TLS and as my reverse proxy. You don't need to use that, but I really just enjoy the convenience of having a TLS certificate and a real domain name. I have Z behind a wildcard DNS record, so that every time I do, you know, service.z.domain, every single DNS request routes to that specific host, no matter what. So I don't need a DNS entry per service. I find it works really well for me. So there is the SmokePing Docker Compose entry. Now I want to go to this directory here because I want to edit this config file. So if we have a quick look at the files that are in there, let's open it this way actually. This is the magic of this remote SSH plugin. You can just edit files on remote servers as if you're on there, but you get a proper editor. I know Vim's a proper editor, but you know what I mean, like a WYSIWYG editor. So let's look at the targets, and you can see that under the default probe here we have fping. Now this is configured under the SmokePing defaults. So if we have a look at fping here on the left-hand side, there's a whole bunch of documentation here about what you can do with fping and how it integrates into SmokePing as a probe. I won't go into a lot of these details here, but there's some obvious stuff that we can look at, like pings equals 20. We talked about that being the default, and step being 300. So that means every 5 minutes fping executes. You can change these values if you want to, if you need a more aggressive schedule for your pings. I just leave everything as the default because I'm primarily interested in these instances in long-term data. If you're more interested in up to the minute data, by all means, go ahead and set a more aggressive schedule. I find the defaults work pretty well for me. What do we want to do here? Let's just see how these things line up. So if we look at the SmokePing instance over here, this is the one in my local network. I'm going to try and arrange these windows so that we can all see what's going on properly. Yeah, I think that'll do. I think that'll do. So we can see here under internet sites, which is this top level one here on line 9, I have one plus sign. So that denotes a top level menu entry. And I give it a title, internet sites, and that's that. Now under YouTube, there's a few options here that we can specify as well. I've got a YouTube menu here, which gives me this particular page. And so on and so forth, really. So you can see here, top levels get 1+, next level gets 2+, and you can even go a level deep below that and go 3+, or I think even 4 if you really want to. So, I mean, adding a new website is really pretty darn easy. Let's say I wanted to add my personal blog. This one, blog.ktz.me. So there is some funniness sometimes with the syntax in this file. It's because SmokePing's quite old and written in Perl, some of the parsing can be a little bit odd. So you've got to watch out for things like spaces and special characters. So I tend to err on the side of caution and just, you can see here in the Linux server.io menu title, there is a dot. So I guess that's okay. But I think in this particular instance, you can't put a dot. And if you do, it's going to break stuff, the parsing I talked about. So I'm just going to err on the side of caution, do menu equals blog ktzme, and then host equals blog.ktz.me. And so what we need to do next, in order to get SmokePing to pick up that configuration, I need to do a docker restart SmokePing. This will take 2 or 3 seconds to restart. And then once it's done, I'm going to run a command detail. This is a bash alias that I used for many years. All it does is it tails the last 50 lines of a log file from a specific container. Shout out to Lonix from the original Linux server crew for supplying me with this one. And you can see over here, fping has 35 targets with a default step of 300 seconds and an offset. The offset is so it doesn't do everything all at the same time. Of 300 seconds. Now, if we go over to the SmokePing instance and refresh the page, you can see blog ktz.me is in here. Now, remember, these pings happen every 5 minutes, so it's going to take a little while to populate this data. But a few hours ago, you can see I added this website, Is Twitter Dead Yet? And we can see that since mid-afternoon, it's been happily smoke pinging away and doing its thing. That's really the basics of SmokePing. This is how you view specific websites and dig into certain charts. I've shown you how to add a new website to the menu over on the left here. One thing I haven't yet shown you, though, is how to use different probes. Now, this can be really useful for things like DNS. And we can see here, under probe DNS, this is a top-level menu because it's only got a single plus, remember, that probe on line 262 is DNS. So if we have a look at the DNS probe here, again, this is the SmokePing documentation. There'll be a link to it in the description down below. We can see there's a bunch of different probes, and what's important to note is that certain tools are better suited to certain jobs. Ping's good for TCP-related tests, but sometimes via DNS we want to do a more advanced test, and the tool dig is incredibly handy for that. And so by specifying on line 262 over here, probe equals DNS, we actually inherit a bunch of this stuff here, and we can use the dig binary in order to run our DNS probes. Now, one other thing we should probably talk about are advanced architectures. of SmokePing. So if we have a quick look at the documentation here, we can see that there's a SmokePing master slave architecture available. Now, I like to run SmokePing on the host that I'm looking to kind of diagnose. So for me, it keeps the pathing very simple in my mind. I've deployed that container on that host, and I know the path out from that server looks like the view of the world that SmokePing is showing me. It does mean that I tend to have sometimes, in this network, I've got 2 or 3 different instances of SmokePing running at any one time. The benefit of that is if one of them goes down, it doesn't affect any of the others. This is a master server slave architecture. So if the master goes down, you'll have gaps in your data from the slaves. Whereas if you just have a master deployed in every single place, for me, I mean, you've got a database in every place, but I think that's the way I prefer to do it. If you're running a school district or you're doing some kind of larger scale deployment, I'm talking larger than your typical home server admin like me, then I could see this making a lot of sense. But for most people at home, certainly most people watching this video, I would imagine, probably just stick to the default. I wanted to just take a moment and talk about the image that I'm using. This is the Linux server SmokePing image. And this is one of the oldest images that Linux server made. And I've used it for a very, very long time, must be 7 or 8+ years at this point. As usual with a Linux server image, it's pretty easy to get started. All the parameters are here over on their documentation website. And you'll find a snippet of the config that I used down in the description down below to my Git repo. Now, there are plenty of other ways to monitor your network like this. There's Prometheus with some kind of data collector scraper. There is InfluxDB mixed with Grafana to generate pretty dashboards. You could use third-party tools like Datadog or New Relic, or there's a bunch of stuff. I really appreciate SmokePing because it follows that traditional Unix philosophy of doing one thing and doing it really well. It's also free, completely as in cost, and also completely open source. So you've got all the tools you need with SmokePing to monitor your network, and we all know a well-monitored network is a healthy and reliable one. I'd love to know what other apps you'd like to see featured in these self-hosted app spotlights down in the comments. And if you like this kind of thing, you might also like the self-hosted podcast over at self-hosted.social, where we talk about all things self-hosted. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.